This might very well turn out to be one of the worst videos I've ever made on this channel. And with that fine introduction, I bid you all a fine welcome to my Q&A video. When I first decided to do a Q&A video, the first thought I had was that I really didn't want to do it in the office yet again, because I always do these videos in the office, and quite frankly, I've spent way too much time in the office lately. My second idea was that maybe I would take the camera and go on a hike and answer your questions out in the nature, maybe make a campfire, sit there and answer your questions in peace and quiet. But then again, I thought, that's also a situation you've seen me in many times. So I thought, what if I go out of my comfort zone? I thought I would challenge myself to show you one of my hobbies. And at the same time, I want to really test out the high-speed camera on the S1, the filming high-speed. I think it's 180 frames per second the S1 can handle, and I really want to test that out at the same time. And right now, you might be wondering, what kind of hobby do oddbjørn have that requires a high-speed camera? And it might not be the most normal thing a 36-year-old person does. Anyway, this is me. I'm gonna answer your questions which you posted in last video, and I'm gonna answer them to the best of my ability while doing one of my favorite pastime hobbies. One of the things I go out and do when I need a break from photography and filming and filmmaking and music. I do this. Hans Christian Strand asks, how does one become a Lumix ambassador? And quite frankly, they asked me. I got an email from Lumix Nordic whether if I would be interested in partnering up with them, and I said yes, and that's how I become a Lumix ambassador. So that's the way I know. They got in contact with me, not the other way around. I hope that answers your question. Creations says that Norway is one of the most beautiful countries for landscape photographers, and I couldn't agree more. I love the waterfalls, I love the mountains, I love the diversity of the Norwegian landscape, and I'm very lucky to be living in Norway. He also asks if there are any countries or locations that I have been to or are still on my go-to list. And from the top of my head, I've been to Svalbard, which was amazing. It's not part of Norway, even though it's governed by Norwegian law. It is no country. It is, in many ways, bear country. I love Svalbard, and I've recently been to Switzerland and France in the Alps, which was also fantastic. But from the top of my head, the places I really want to go right now, and I would go there tomorrow given the opportunity. One is Greenland. That has been on my list for many years. And the other country, or the other location, Alaska.
Ever since I was a little boy, I want to visit Alaska. So yeah, fingers crossed for Alaska and Greenland. Marcus wanted to ask about my experiences with the S1, and then he also added that I would probably talk a bit about the camera in this video anyway. And I will not talk too much about the new camera in this video, but I promise you, Marcus, that in my future videos there will be plenty of camera talk. Alright, I hope that answers your question. As you can see, I'm not much of a skater, but we're here to answer some more questions. So let's see what we got here. Alan Coles writes, I moved from the Canon full-frame 5D Mark III to a Micro Four Third system, the G9, earlier this year. It was a weight-saving thing as I tried to lighten my load for walking in the hills. The camera is great on good light days, but so far my experience in low light conditions, I have found the camera wanting a more dynamic range, and noise bothers me. You said at the front of this that you had developed some workarounds to some of these problems. Would that be noise, and if so, how did you manage? I've been looking at the S1 recently as I love the ergonomics of the Panasonic system, but it looks a bit heavy for hiking with. There's a helicopter which makes a bit of noise. So I just have to wait the helicopter out. Alright, Alan, it's true. I did say that I've developed some techniques and tips and tricks how to walk around some of the challenges that Micro Four Third system bring. And I have 3 techniques that I go to time and time again. And the first tip is that I always use a tripod when photographing. And that's because then I can control the ISO. Try to keep it as low as possible at all times, and that's where the tripod comes in handy. Also, with the use of a tripod, you can bracket, and when there's an image I really want to kind of drag out the details and the shadows and preserve the highlights, I always bracket, and I use the manual bracket. I do 3 manual exposures where I expose for the bright light, and then I expose for the middle, and then I expose for the shadows. Of course, when you're photographing seascape, that's not always possible to bracket, but if it's a still subject, I bracket, and then I combine them in Lightroom, and I do that every time. And the third thing I do is that I sometimes photograph with the panorama technique, and then I crop it down to 3:2, which the sensor offers, the native crop. But when I use the panorama technique and then crop it down to 3:2, it gives a much more clearer picture. It's almost like a semi-high-res mode, because you multiply the megapixels as you kind of photograph 3 images and then crop it down afterwards. And it works really well. So those are my 3 techniques. A panorama crop down to 3:2, manual extreme bracketing, and always use a tripod to control the ISO numbers, getting it as low as possible. Tomlinson asks, how do you like the image stitching it can do? Have you tried it? Have you used it for filming? How's the continuous autofocus? And why don't you use an L bracket? Alright. Whew, winded. Alright, the L bracket first. When I filmed the last video, the S1 was brand new, so I didn't have an L bracket in place at that time. I had ordered it, but it hadn't arrived yet. But now it has arrived and I have an L bracket. That's I often use an L bracket because they are quite handy. As for image stitching...
Alright, confession time. When you talked about image stitching, for some reason when I was out filming I thought you were talking about when you're stitching a panorama together. And when I got back and started editing this Q&A, I suddenly realized that you're probably talking about the image stitching with the high-res mode, where you combine 8 images and make a 96 megapixel image from those 8 images. And yes, I have tried that, and I think it works really well, as long as the subject is still and not moving. For example, if you're photographing seascape and there's a moving wave or something, it won't work as well as when you're photographing a still subject. So yes, I've tried it and I find that it works really well in most conditions. And I will probably touch upon this subject in a future video where I tried this function out in a vlog and you can see the results for yourself. Alright.
As for filming, yes, I use it to film this. So if I'm in focus right now, that means the continuous autofocus is working. I seldom use autofocus. When I was in film school many years ago, this was pre-autofocus. So I learned how to manual focus from a very early age, and that kind of stuck with me for the remainder of my years. I never bothered too much with autofocus. The only times I use autofocus is when I'm alone like this. And if I'm photographing an event or a wedding, then autofocus is brilliant. And as far as I know, the autofocus on the S1, it works really well. I photographed 2 events. I have had no problem with the autofocus during photography. Alright, hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, I'm not so sure how good idea it was to film my Q&A in the local skate park, but luckily it seems like I'm the only one using it, so I can make a fool out of myself without nobody watching. But then again, I'm filming this whole thing, so everybody will watch it. Well, as long as you have fun and it gives you something in return, then I say just go for it, just do it. Life's too short.
Pekko Alsten is wondering about the weight and size of the S1 compared to my GH5. And before I came out to the skate park, I weighed the S1 with the L bracket and with the equivalent lens that I mainly use for the GH5, and the S1 was 700 grams heavier than the GH5. So yeah, 700 grams. He also wonders if I find it too heavy compared to Micro Four Thirds. And I don't so far, but I haven't taken the S1 on longer hikes. It's more heavy, but 700 grams isn't too much of a jump in weight. So no, so far, but I might change my mind when I'm dragging 3 lenses and a full frame camera system up in the wilderness. I don't know. Jennifer Granger is wondering whether her Olympus Pro lenses will fit on the full frame Lumix series, and the answer to that is unfortunately no. No Micro Four Thirds type lenses will fit on the full frame series from Lumix. That being said, any Lumix in the Micro Four Thirds series, like the GH4, GH5, the G9, those lenses will fit on a Micro Four Thirds system from Lumix. She also wondered about the weight on the S1, and I answered that in a previous question. You also write that you are wondering whether to purchase a Lumix body next for your next camera, and you're wondering if I can recommend a camera. I've been using the GH5 a lot, and I love that camera, but it's it's a hybrid camera. So maybe if you're more into photography, the G9 will be a better option for you. But I have not tried the G9. All I can tell is that people speak highly of it. So I guess if I personally shall recommend a camera, I need to go with the camera that I've tried, which is the GH5. So I recommend the GH5. But you should also look at the G9 as an option, as that is more suited to photography, where the GH5 is kind of more of a hybrid camera. Alright, I hope that answers your question.
And now that you've seen my hobby, my new passion, I could ask you the same thing, my viewers. What are your hobbies? And if you have any, just write them in the comment section. I would love to hear more about it.
Røde Smith is wondering what drives me to a full frame camera, as he considers an upgrade himself. And he also asked whether or not the Rags and Feathers album is coming out on Spotify.
All right, Boris, the sound failed me yet again in the skate park, so here I am in pose and I'm gonna try to recreate my answer to the best of my ability. First, I want to talk a bit about the question you asked, what drives me to full frame system when so many people choose to go the other way. And I have to say that there are benefits on both sides. The GH5 weighs less, the lenses are smaller, but at the same time it has less dynamic range, and I find that the ISO performance is poorer because of the small sensor. And therefore, when I, for example, photograph a wedding in a poorly lit church, or I am at an event in a dim office, I find it sometimes hard to work with higher ISO levels on the Micro Four Thirds system. So I guess that's what kind of drives me to a full frame system, if you can say that. You have more dynamic range, and it works better in low light condition, and the ISO performance really is good.
5000 ISO, 6004, 8, 10 000, 12 8, 16 000. 25 600, 32 000, 40, 51 200.
But so far the switch has been great. That being said, I haven't shelved the GH5, and nor do I think I will do that just yet. As for your question about when the Rags and Feathers album is coming out on Spotify, and if we're playing a concert in Kongsberg, I will have to refer you to this woman right here.
So, Justy, I got a question from Boris Smith, and he was wondering when our album is coming out on Spotify, and if we wanted to play a concert in Kongsberg anytime soon.
Okay, Boris, you know, our album will maybe never be on Spotify. Or at least not this one, but maybe in a few years, but I don't think you should count on it. Regarding your question about whether we want to play in Kongsberg or not, if you know a good venue, then you can tip us and maybe we can pop by on our way to Oslo in the nearest future. We would love to play in Kongsberg, and thank you so much for your questions. And a Merry Christmas.
All right, Boris, I hope that answered your questions. I have one last question remaining, and as you can see from my notes here, it's a bit broken. It's from David Spraggs. First of all, thank you for your question, David. Quick question: Why the change from Micro Four Thirds to a full frame, giving that you go on longer hikes and not giving up, I think it's giving up a small lighter system and more portable for a full frame, bigger, heavier camera lenses, when a lot of others have gone the other way from full frame to Micro Four Thirds or APS-C systems. And what is your thought process and difficulties you have encountered on the 4/3 system? Alright, first of all, I have not given up the Micro Four Thirds system, and I might very well choose the Micro Four Thirds systems when I go on longer hikes, because I need to consider weight. If I don't consider weight, I'm just being ignorant. That being said, my experience with the S1 so far is that it's not that much of a weight gain. It's 700 grams, and I can live with that. So far I've been traveling with both systems on my hikes, and because I don't have all the lenses for the S1, even traveling with 2 cameras and I think 4 lenses has not been all that challenging for me. As for difficulties I've encountered using the 4/3 system, and I've talked about all those 3 things before in this video, so I hope it's okay with you that I don't repeat what I've already said. That concludes my Q&A video, and I hope I answered all your questions in a way that made sense to you. And if I haven't, please write so in the comment section. I will try to write more cohesive and more clever. It's been a weird one. Alright, my next video will be a hike me and the brilliant Ian Smith did to Preikestolen in Stavanger. The Pulpit Rock, in one of Norway's most famous tourist attractions. So I hope you will tune in for that. It will probably air a week or so from now, and during the Christmas, during my holidays. So since that was filmed in the past and this is filmed in the future, I will just like to say a Merry Christmas to you all. I'm rambling now, I'm sorry. So Merry Christmas to you all and a Happy New Year, and I'll see you all with good spirits in January with brand new adventures. Okay. Have a nice Christmas and a good New Year. Take care. Snakkes fint. Ha det bra alle sammen.